The morning sun barely crested the ridge when Rose stepped out of the tent, her boots sinking into cold mud. The mountains stood quiet and watchful, their peaks dusted with early frost. Somewhere below them, a creek murmured over stones, steady and uncaring. Rose pulled her shawl tighter and scanned the clearing, already knowing where Billy would be. He was knee-deep in the claim pit, pickaxe in hand, striking the earth with a rhythm that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Each blow echoed through the narrow valley, sharp and hopeful. "You didn't sleep again," Rose said. Billy paused, resting his weight on the handle of the pick. Dirt smeared his face, and his eyes were red from more than exhaustion. "Didn't need to. I kept thinking about what's down here." Rose climbed closer, careful not to slip. "You've been thinking about what's down there for 6 months, and one of these days, I'll be right." He smiled. That crooked smile that had convinced her to follow him west in the first place. "I feel it, Rosie. This ground's different." She had heard that before. Different creek beds, different hillsides, different promises. But this claim had cost them more than the others. They'd sold their spare horse to stake it, traded supplies they couldn't afford to lose, and weathered 2 brutal storms, waiting for gold that stubbornly refused to show itself. Rose knelt beside the pit and brushed loose dirt from a rock. "Feeling isn't the same as eating," she said softly. Billy sighed and climbed out, sitting beside her. "I know it's been hard. Hard, I can handle," Rose replied. "Danger is what worries me." He followed her gaze to the ridgeline. The land felt emptier than it should, like a room holding its breath. Rose had noticed it for days, the way birds scattered suddenly, how tracks appeared and disappeared near their camp. She trusted instincts shaped by years of loss. "This place has eyes," she continued. "People hear rumors. They don't care who found what first." Billy reached for her hand, calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "I won't let anything happen to you." "That's not always a choice," she said. Their silence stretched, filled only by the creek and the wind threading through pines. Rose remembered the night she'd met Billy on the trail west, how he'd shared his last biscuit with her, how his laughter cut through her loneliness. Loving him had felt easy then. Loving him now meant watching him chase something that might destroy them both. "I didn't come out here for gold," she said finally. "I came because I believed in us." Billy looked away, jaw tightening. "I need to make this work. I need to prove I can give you more than scraps and mud." "You already do," Rose said. "You give me a reason to wake up." He met her eyes, emotion flickering across his face before stubborn resolve took its place. "Just a little longer." A sound broke the moment stones, shifting uphill. Rose stiffened. Billy stood instantly, hand drifting toward the rifle, leaning against a tree. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Billy nodded. Probably just a deer, but neither of them believed it. As the sound faded, Rose felt a chill deeper than the mountain air. She squeezed Billy's hand once more, holding on like the earth beneath them might give way. Gold, she thought, had a way of turning hope into a blade. And this claim already felt sharp. The hills didn't feel the same after that morning. Rose noticed it first, in the way the air seemed tighter, as though the land itself had grown wary. Even the creek's steady murmur felt quieter, muffled by something unseen. She kept busy near camp, her hands working out of habit while her eyes never stopped moving. Billy dug hour after hour. The pick rang against stone, each strike filled with stubborn purpose. He barely stopped to drink water, barely spoke, unless Rose forced him to. His shoulders were tense, his movements sharp, like a man racing against an enemy only he could see. Near midday, Rose found fresh boot prints by the edge of the creek. They weren't Billy's. She crouched low, brushing her fingers along the impression. The tread was wide, heavy men's boots, and more than one set. Her stomach knotted. She straightened slowly and scanned the trees. Nothing moved, but she felt watched all the same. When Billy returned for food, she showed him the tracks. Could be travelers, he said. though his voice lacked conviction. "Travelers don't circle camps," Rose replied. "They pass through." Billy hesitated, then nodded. "I'll keep the rifle close." That night, the hills came alive. Lantern light flickered on distant ridges, glowing briefly before disappearing. Somewhere far off, a mule brayed. Rose sat by the fire, feeding it small sticks, pretending not to notice how Billy kept glancing into the darkness. "They know," she said quietly. Billy exhaled. "We haven't found enough for it to matter. That doesn't stop men from wanting it." He didn't argue. He couldn't. The next morning brought visitors. 2 men rode into the clearing just after sunrise, their horses lean but well kept. One wore a faded red neckerchief, the other a hat pulled low enough to hide his eyes. They didn't smile. "Mornin'," the taller one said. "Heard there's color in these hills." Billy stepped forward. "Claims are marked." "Marks fade," the man replied easily. "Paper burns." Rose felt the weight of Billy's silence. She stepped beside him, her presence a quiet line in the dirt. "We're not selling," she said. The man's eyes flicked to her, then back to Billy. "Didn't say you were." They left soon after, but the warning lingered like smoke. That afternoon, Billy struck gold again. This time, it wasn't just a flake. It was a narrow seam running through the rock, thin but undeniable. Billy laughed a sharp, breathless sound and grabbed Rose, spinning her despite her protests. "We did it," he said. "Rose, we did it." She smiled, but fear hollowed her joy. "We need to leave," she urged. "Now take what we have and go, and let them take the rest." Billy shook his head. "This is our future. Our future won't matter if we're dead." He stared at the seam, then back at her. Just a few more days. That night, Rose packed quietly: food, matches, medicine, and the small pouch of gold they'd already gathered. She tucked it beneath her bedroll, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. It wasn't betrayal, it was survival. As she lay awake, listening to Billy's breathing beside her, Rose wondered when hope had turned into a risk. She wasn't sure they could survive. Outside, a branch snapped. Rose's eyes flew open, and somewhere in the darkness, a man smiled, knowing the claim was worth more than patience. The storm hit before dawn, a gray wall of wind and rain that tore across the hills with no warning. The tent shuddered and flapped violently, water soaking everything inside. Rose woke with a start, heart hammering, and immediately reached for Billy. He was already up, crouched by the claim pit, his hair plastered to his forehead, eyes scanning the gray blur of rain. His pick lay abandoned beside him. "Storm came early," he muttered, voice rough with cold and exhaustion. "Storms don't care about gold," Rose said, grabbing her coat. "We need to secure the supplies." Billy nodded, but his attention never left the seam of gold peeking through the mud. "One more strike," he said, voice almost pleading with the earth. "Just one more, and we'll be safe inside for days." Rose grabbed his arm. "Billy, listen to me. We're not safe out here if you keep chasing this claim." He looked at her then, eyes wide and fevered. "I can't stop now. We're so close." They had barely moved when the first gunshot cracked through the storm. It was sharp, echoing against the cliffs, and it made the air itself feel heavier. Billy froze, face pale, then grabbed the rifle they had hidden under the tarp. "Get down," Rose shouted, dragging him behind a boulder. The rain masked some of the sound, but not all. Another shot rang out, this one closer. "Phew," Billy began, but Rose shook her head. "I don't know. Doesn't matter. We move." They ran through the mud, slipping, sliding, and finally collapsing in a shallow ravine. Billy clutched his shoulder. Blood was seeping through his shirt, and Rose's stomach dropped. "It's not deep," he said quickly, wincing. "I'll be fine." Rose pressed her hands to the wound anyway, trying to stop the bleeding. Her fingers were trembling, but she didn't allow herself to think beyond the immediate. They had to get out. Whoever had shot him wasn't going to wait for them to finish packing gold. Through the storm, she caught a glimpse of the shooter, a man leaning against a tree, rifle smoking, his face hidden in shadows. Fear coiled in her chest, but anger flared brighter. "Rose," Billy's voice cracked. "Take the gold. Leave me if you have to." She shook her head fiercely. "I'm not leaving you." Using the ravine as cover, they crawled downhill toward the lower trees, every muscle in Rose's body screaming with the effort. The man fired again, but the mud and rain swallowed the bullet. They barely made it into the forest, soaked, exhausted, and trembling from adrenaline. When they finally stopped, Billy sank to the ground, leaning against a tree. Rose crouched beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "We're alive," she whispered. "That's what matters." Billy touched her face, blood from a cut mixing with rain on his hand. "I almost lost you," he said, voice breaking. I thought it would all be worth it." Rose shook her head, pressing her forehead against his. "Nothing is worth losing us. Not gold, not claims, not anything in this world. Not even dreams of fortune." He closed his eyes, finally letting himself rest against her. The storm raging around them, a reminder that the hills had teeth, and they had survived because they chose each other over greed. Somewhere above them, the claim glimmered faintly in the lightning, taunting, daring them to return. But Rose knew what they had to do. The gold wasn't worth it. Not when love, fear, and survival all demanded they walk away. Dawn broke with a pale light that barely cut through the remnants of the storm. The hills were quiet now, but the earth still smelled of rain and fear. Billy stirred, wincing as he pushed himself up. His shoulder throbbed, but the wound wasn't fatal. Rose helped him to his feet, steadying him against the slick rocks. "We have to go," she said firmly. Now, Billy's eyes drifted back to the pit, to the seam of gold that had drawn them into danger. "Everything we worked for," he began. Rose shook her head. "Everything we worked for almost killed us. That gold isn't ours if it costs our lives." For the first time, Billy hesitated, truly hesitated. He glanced at the hills, then at Rosette, the hand that still clutched his arm, steady, determined. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, let's go." They packed only what was essential: a few days' worth of food, the mule, blankets, and the small pouch of gold flakes they had already gathered. Rose wrapped the pouch in cloth and buried it beneath a cairn of stones near the pit. It was a silent promise that neither of them would ever return. The ride down the mountainside was treacherous. Mudslides from the storm had shifted paths and filled creeks, but Rose led the mule carefully, her eyes scanning for signs of pursuit. Billy followed, tense and quiet, his thoughts clearly torn between the dream of fortune and the relief of escape. By midday, they had crossed into gentler hills. The air was warmer, the creek waters calmer, and Billy finally let out a long breath. "I thought I'd never leave that claim," he admitted. "Some treasures aren't in the ground," Rose said softly, glancing at him. "They're in moments like this, moments where we choose each other over everything else." Billy looked at her, eyes wide and sincere. "I almost lost sight of that." "You didn't," Rose replied. "You're here, we're alive. That's what matters." For the rest of the day, they moved slowly, finding shelter in a small hollow lined with pine trees. Billy tended to his shoulder, and Rose cooked what little food they had. The hills around them seemed to sigh, as if relieved the claim had been abandoned. That night, they lay under a blanket of stars. Rose watched Billy sleep, his face still smudged with dirt and rain, but peaceful. The seam of gold in the pit shimmered somewhere far above them, but it no longer called to him. He had found something richer, love that didn't demand risk, companionship that didn't fade with fortune. "Tomorrow," Billy whispered in his sleep, "we start over." "Yes," Rose said quietly, brushing a lock of wet hair from her face. Together, the mountains loomed behind them, silent witnesses to the choice they had made. Some men never left the hills with their hearts intact. But Billy and Rose had walked away not empty-handed, but full in ways no gold could measure. In the warmth of that moment, both knew that leaving the claim behind was the first real victory they had ever won. The small town of Silver Creek wasn't much a cluster of weathered wooden buildings. A saloon with a swinging door and dusty streets that carried the scent of hay and coal butt to Rose and Billy. It felt like home. After weeks of riding, hiding, and surviving in the hills, they had finally settled somewhere safe. Somewhere ordinary, somewhere they could breathe. Billy's shoulder had healed, though the scar remained. A quiet reminder of the storm and the man who had tried to take everything from them. Rose had taken to tending a boarding house, keeping the rooms tidy and cooking hearty meals for travelers and townsfolk. She laughed more freely here, without the constant edge of fear. Billy found work as a carpenter, fixing fences, barns, and furniture. He had traded dreams of gold for a life that was steady, tangible, and shared with someone he loved. He still occasionally touched his hands to the pocket where a piece of gold flake had survived in a hidden fold of cloth. Not for greed, but as a memory of lessons learned. One evening, Rose and Billy walked down the main street. The sun low in the sky, painting the town in gold and crimson. Children ran past with hoops and sticks. Dogs barked at their heels, and the scent of bread and coffee mingled in the warm air. Billy stopped to watch a boy fall and get up again, brushing off his trousers with a grin. Rose slid her hand into his. "I never thought we'd see peace like this," Billy said softly. "After everything in the hills, I thought we might lose it all." "You didn't," Rose said, smiling. "We walked away. That's what matters. We chose each other over gold." Billy turned to her, eyes serious, yet full of warmth. "You were right," he admitted. "Gold doesn't buy love. It doesn't buy safety or laughter or mornings like this. I thought fortune was the prize. The prize was you." Rose's lips curved, and she leaned into him. "And you," she whispered. "Always you." The townsfolk, unaware of the hill's dark tales, continued their day. But Rose and Billy didn't need witnesses to their triumph. They had found a treasure no claim could ever promise. A life built together, safe, steady, and rich in the quiet joys of love. Occasionally, they would talk about the claim they had abandoned. The seam of gold, the dangerous men, the storm. It was all behind them now. And sometimes, just sometimes, they'd smile at the memory, knowing they had made the hardest choice of their lives, and the right one. Gold glittered in the hills, waiting for men willing to risk blood and bones. But Rose and Billy had found something far more valuable. A love that had survived storms, danger, and the lure of fortune. And it would last far longer than any treasure buried in cold, hard earth. As they watched the sun dip behind the horizon, the sky painted in fiery shades of orange and pink, Billy whispered, "No fortune could ever compare." Rose rested her head on his shoulder. "We're rich, Billy. Richer than gold." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.